Welcome back to Capital Time, to statewide look at politics. I'm Tim Boyle. Tonight marks the first of 3 debates in the race for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. Pits the current Senator and Democrat Kay Hagan against House Speaker and Republican Thom Tillis. So who needs to win, who has the most to lose, and everything else in between? Joining us from our Greensboro newsroom, UNC Greensboro Communications Studies Professor Dr. Roy Schwartzman and Political Science Professor Dr. Susan Roberts from Davidson. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for your time today, as always. Dr. Schwartzman, I guess, what are you looking at tonight, and how important is this?
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, one of the things that's been happening is you've had a lot of agenda setting by the third-party advocacy groups, and that is the external spending, the super PACs, the political advocacy groups, and all of that. And I think there's going to be a lot of testing of the waters to figure out which kinds of issues are going to stimulate the kinds of emotional commitments that not only are going to trigger greater support for the candidate, but the bottom line is motivate people to show up at the polls. Historically, turnouts are very low in midterm elections. Very small difference so far in the polling between these two candidates, within a couple of percentage points. So it's all a matter of getting people fired up enough with things that they can connect with that are going to get them to the polls. And I think this is just going to be a large experiment tonight to see what that's going to be.
Dr. Roberts, do you see that as almost a dry run to see what they need to do in the next 8 weeks?
Oh, absolutely. If I were directing the campaign, I would frame every answer in terms of generating turnout. The Republicans have an advantage in what they call the enthusiasm gap. More Republicans are excited about voting in this midterm than ever before. I think Kay Hagan has a little bit more to lose, but she also is an incumbent. When we talk about, as we will, about the distinction between Kay Hagan and President Obama, the bottom line for me would be she can't deny her association, but she can downplay it. And I think that is one of the ways she will frame every answer she gives.
Dr. Schwartzman, I mean, a lot of these answers going to be what we, as sort of insiders paying attention closely, have already heard?
Well, I think you're not going to find a lot of straying from the script. But I would agree with Professor Roberts that the key here is for Hagan to kind of have this comfortable distance from Obama. Basically, Tillis is going to try to make this race a referendum on President Obama. And so you're going to find a conflation between Hagan and Obama there. Basically, anything bad that happened during Obama's presidency, Kay Hagan's to blame. Interestingly, I think Hagan might have some opportunity here to do the same sort of thing on a much more local level, saying, well, hey, if you don't like things with the General Assembly, Thom Tillis is the reason why. And let me mention, the General Assembly's approval ratings in North Carolina are somewhat higher than the U.S. Congress's, but then again, what isn't? But there's tremendous dissatisfaction with the performance of the state legislature, and if she can link that with Thom Tillis' leadership in that body, then I think she has a nice balancing act to counterpose against her linkage with Obama.
Well, Dr. Roberts, playing off of what he just said, usually these Senate races hinge on what's happening up in Washington, so it is, in some ways, a little unusual that she's hinging this race on what's happening at the General Assembly. Can that be enough to win this race, do you think?
I don't think it's enough to win the race, but I think North Carolinians, maybe for the first time, they're remembering what you could call the long, short session of the legislature, and I think they were focusing on issues such as education, and that's an issue on which I think Thom Tillis is driving. I'm not sure, and he's doing that in association with Pat McCrory, and the public policy polling recently gave Governor McCrory the grade of C. So I think that it's going to be a question of North Carolina and Washington. What I'm interested in seeing is the degree to which this is a nationalized election or one that it addresses North Carolinians. Because having star power in terms of the moderator, that really might make the election and the questions much more favorable to Thom Tillis.
That's interesting. Dr. Schwartzman, you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And in fact, historically, if you take a look at the way that Hagan ran her 2008 campaign, it wasn't just a matter of getting in on the coattails of Barack Obama, but it was also a matter of hitting very hard that Liddy Dole was not closely associated with the interests of the rank-and-file North Carolinians. Now, obviously, that's not going to work as well this time because she does have someone who is very active in local politics. So that there is going to have to be this weighing of which is going to be the wiser strategy. I can say that the saying is true that all politics is local, and generally, if you can have a connection point that directly addresses what voters are feeling right here in North Carolina, they're far less concerned with things like foreign affairs and all of that. So look for some attempts to explore that opportunity, really by both candidates.
Dr. Roberts, you do a lot of research about gender and politics. I mean, we do have this dynamic here of a female candidate and a male candidate. Do you think that plays that out at all in this election?
Well, there's a greater percentage of voters in North Carolina, registered voters, who are females. I think that it would be a mistake for her to couch all women's issues as reproductive rights issues, because I think women are looking for education issues. They're looking at pay equity, raising the minimum wage. I don't know how much she'll make a direct appeal to women, but again, she has to get them to turn out. As we've talked before, there is a drop-off in a midterm election and not in a general election. She lost. Kay Hagan won to a woman over a woman before, and I don't know necessarily, that was more on a coattail that she won, and a little bit of the gaffe by the Dole campaign in terms of the commercial at the very end when she almost called Kay Hagan an atheist.
Dr. Schwartzman, yesterday on this show we had a couple folks talk about how this is almost more about performance than it is about politics. In other words, the folks that like these candidates will still like them, and the ones they don't, they won't. I mean, is tonight a lot about how they perform as much about what they say?
Well, yeah, and in fact, one could argue, at least from a rhetorical standpoint, and I come at this from that rhetorical angle, that to a large extent politics is performance. It's a performance sport, if you will. And so really, I would say it's less a matter of saying, is it performance or is it issues? I think that issues are a conduit through which people channel their emotional commitments and their values. And so education might appear as an important issue, but really what it is it's a gateway to tapping into, for instance, feelings of commitment to one's children and their well-being. And if you can spark that, that is the type of close to home, in a very literal sense, issue that would get voters to the polls to render a definite decision. And by the way, we also haven't talked about something that's nowhere to be seen in a lot of the official analyses, and that is we do have a third-party candidate in the picture here, and a third-party candidate that is polling around consistently 8% or so. And it's an open question as to what's going to happen to that group of the electorate, whether they will just say, oh, well, there's no hope of them winning, we'll stay home, or if it does tend to cut into, usually with a libertarian candidate like this, it would be the Republican candidate. But that's not a guarantee, so that's also a wild card out there.
Yeah, and he's not taking part in those debates, but we will have him on the program tomorrow to react to tonight's debate as well. Dr. Roy Schwartzman, Dr. Susan Roberts, great analysis, very fascinating stuff. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, we're about out of time for tonight, but before we go, here's a look at what's on tap for our program.